So for this week's Preppin data, we've got Roman numerals to look at. So if we just take a look in the sample values here, we can see our Roman numeral displayed there. And what we're going to want to do initially is split that up into the individual characters. So if we just in a similar way to how we solved the cipher challenge, we're going to look at the length, so the number of characters that our Roman numeral has, and that's 9. We're going to use the scaffold that we have, which is just a list of numbers, and we're going to use a join where we're saying that, hey, we want all the numbers where our length, which is 9, is greater than or equal to the scaffold. So basically, we want the numbers 1 to 9. So that means that we now have 9 rows rather than just the 1. And then we can use the mid function, which is great to give us our individual rows. So the mid function, we're saying, hey, from our big long number that we have, our Roman numeral, take the scaffold position and just return 1 character. And that's how we read that function. And it splits it all up nicely for us here. So now we're ready to bring in our Roman numerals and their equivalent values. But before we do that, we just have an extra little step here, which I'm going to explain. So our Roman numerals, the values that are associated with them are obviously here in descending order, so from the largest to the smallest, because that's kind of how a Roman numeral would be written. It would be written, with the thousands over in the thousands column and the units over in the units column. So we're ranking those from highest to lowest, so we kind of have some kind of idea of the order that our Roman numerals should be in, because it's only when we're doing things like 5 or 50, not 5 or 50, 4 or sort of 49 or 40, not 49. I don't know my Roman numerals clearly. Sorry, it's values like 4, 9, 40, those sort of values where we need to have, say, it would be like IV or IX. That's when we're going to sort of have an issue with the ordering, because the smaller number comes before the bigger number, and that's where we're going to want to make it negative, basically. So this is why we're adding this rank on here, where we're literally just taking this column and, performing a rank on it. If we just pop that open to see, then yeah. Don't know why it's not loading. There we go. We're just having that in a descending order to get our ranking number associated with it. Cool. And all we've done there is then rename it to be rank. So if we just do our join based on our value and our Roman numeral, then we can see that we leave behind the L because there's no L in our Roman numeral at the moment. Not a problem. And that all joins up nicely to give us sort of closer to where we want to get to. So now what we have, if we look at our data, then we're trying to create a rule that makes this C in our, that makes the C in our Roman numeral a negative, because we know that it's going to be a 400 that we're going to get to because it's CD, so that means 400. So we want to minus off this hundreds from our total when we're summing it up. So we need to somehow create a rule that tells us that logically in Tableau Prep. So the logical kind of thing to be looking at here is our ranking and our scaffolding, because our scaffold field is basically just the order in which is in our Roman numeral. So we want to kind of say, hey, if the order of the scaffold is different to the order of the rank, so if it's in the wrong position, basically it's in a higher up position than it should be, then that means that it's going to be affecting our total negatively. So what we're going to do is, for at the moment, our ranking, it's not the numbers 1 to 9, it's only the numbers 1 to 7. So we want those to be the numbers 1 to 9, basically, to start off with, to give us some kind of idea of where our Roman numeral should be in the ordering, in the context of how many characters we have in total. So we just write a calculated field that puts a row number based on the rank field that we currently have, and it gives us those numbers 1 to 9 there. So we can see that it's very similar to the scaffold field, but the key difference is for the D and the C. So we see that the D should be before the C because it's 4, 5, based on numerically how it should be. But in our scaffold example, we have the D at 5 and the C at 4. So that's the crux of it. That's how we're going to get the logic there that we need to make that number negative. So before we do that though, if we were just to write a calculated field that said if the scaffold is less than the order, then make that negative, then we'd have an issue with all these m's, wouldn't we? Because our m's aren't lined up correctly, the ordering and the scaffolding at the moment. They're just in kind of they're not aligned to how they should be. So we'd have some of the m's counting negatively, which we don't want. So we're going to do a nice, what's the maximum? I don't know if we actually use that later on. No, ignore that step. We're going to get rid of that step and that step because they're not useful to us. What we do instead, is we want to know for each of our Roman numerals, how many times does it repeat itself? Because if it's in the wrong order, then it'll only ever be, there'll only be one of them. So that will kind of help us. So we use an LOD, a fixed LOD, to count how many times each Roman numeral is occurring. So that when we then come to our writing a calculated field, then we can say that scaffold being less than the ordering and also has the condition that it only appears once. And therefore that's what's going to help us get to the -1 multiplier. And then when we multiply that through to update these numeric values, then you can see that our C is the only one that's becoming negative. And then it's just a simple case of aggregating and dragging the columns to rearrange them. So hopefully that makes sense. Bit of confusing, difficult to explain logic, but I hope that you can understand why it works. So thanks for listening.